Okie doke. Good afternoon. I'm Anto Budiarjo. Welcome to Monday Live. This is something that we do every Monday afternoon to try and figure out the future for smart buildings. It's really good to have you with us today. Just in case you're wondering who we are, our profiles are listed on mondaylive.org. So head over there. And just to point out, the views expressed here in this hour are personal, not of any company or organization. Just keep that in mind. And let's make it interactive with everybody here by using the Zoom chat. It always makes this hour much more interactive and informative. And if you want anything from the slide deck, it's also available on mondaylive.org. So this being November, we're in the middle of November, roughly, we have been talking about composing digital twins for real ROI. So we're going to continue that. And our agenda today, a normal news and trends chit chat. And then on the composing digital twin, we want to talk about decomposing so that we can compose. I think this is going to be a very sort of interesting angle of this discussion. So looking forward to that discussion. But before that, as always, going to hand it over to Ken Sinclair for news from the industry. What's going on, Ken?
Great. Are you gonna bring my? Oh, good. As I say, God, don't bring my slide up. I won't know what to talk about. Great. Okay, up on the left-hand corner there, I think we're going to start to see a lot of this in the future. This is about problems in a server thing, and it was basically the problem that we don't have one truth. We have basically data from one source that is saying something and data from another source that is saying the exact opposite. And naturally, that's going to cause a lot of conflict. So I think as we start to decompose and recompose, we have to make sure that when we share data and the people who are having the interactions have to be looking at exactly the same data, and our compositions need to be commissioned, and we all agree that the data we're seeing is real. Anyway, it's an interesting article. Take a click on it and see what you think. Below that is Taming the Beast, Why Your Digital Twin Should Be an Orchestra. And we've been kind of going through this evolution. We said that the twin, it's not a twin, it's twins. And there's also AI agents, and there's all these pieces that are coming at us, and the successes in basically pulling that all together in an orchestra. I took a little bit of a shot at that. The next level. Simulation involves two twins creating dynamic bidirectional interactions. We've had some discussion on that. It's we're just talking before we got started here, is the concept of a digital twin is simple, but the actual implementation and the creation and the composing and decomposing and composing of it is tough, because there's a lot of stuff in a true digital twin as we envision it, and as we create this dynamic bidirectional interactions. That's causing a lot of complications, but in those few words is a tremendous amount of power. And in that tremendous amount of power, it's the ability to actually do simulations, real-time simulations, and basically have that affect the actual outcome. So always try to get it simpler, but every time I try to explain it, it gets more complex. Down at the bottom there, we've got a node to go, and it's talking about how you're going to sell your AI. I think there's some good wisdom. It's from our contributing editor, Thomas, and he does a good job of just pulling out what some of the problems are. And often when you get a no, it's not that they're saying that, no, I don't like AI. It's that you just haven't done a good job of explaining what you're going to do useful with AI. And anyway, another good read. We have another one from Civil that he's talking about that this has to happen at a high level. People have to embrace the concept of twins and the power and the whole extension of the BIM building information model thinking. So that's a good article as well. And of course, we're hard at putting together our programs for Vegas. Uh, they are dynamic. As you click on them, you'll see people get added. I just noticed that Anno got added to our second session on the with Tracy. So they are building as we move closer to February. Ironically enough, with Thanksgiving coming up, Christmas, I think it'll be on us before we're ready for it. So uh, I think that's about it. Back to you, Anto.
Okay, Ken, thank you. Yeah, Ashray, before you know it, we'll all be in Vegas.
That's right.
All right, so Rick, over to you. What's going on in C4SB? Some updates, the highlights.
Yeah, speaking of Vegas, we're really turning our attention to AHR and how the different working groups and C4SB as a whole are going to be present at in Las Vegas at AHR. And one of the things that we've been talking about is how to invite the different leaders of the working groups to have different time slots to be able to present what the working groups are up to. And so stay tuned for that. If you're one of the leaders of or involved in one of the leadership spots in one of these working groups, just know that we're going to have some opportunities, whether it's on the show floor or in the different sessions, to be able to talk about the working groups. And if you're curious about what's happening with the working groups, you can contact us to find out how to get involved or to stay tuned for what could be a schedule of different presentations about the various working groups. With that, I'm excited about what this presentation is today relative to the decomposing, and it's hard for me to hide my excitement about how the decomposing, moving to enabling composing, and how critical that is to the concept of what we're doing in C4SB, where we're trying to demonstrate how different pieces of a puzzle or Legos come together. Sorry. So this episode of Monday Live, I feel like, is one of the critical ones for people to understand what we're trying to accomplish with C4SB. So without further ado, I'll throw it back to Anto to
If I can just jump in between, Rick, if you could give us a little bit of a roadmap for Vegas, that would
oh
be useful because I think what you were offering there is a chance to meet with uh, every one of your, I'm not sure what you
yeah.
call it, divisions, I guess. And yeah, so that would be great because as you know, it's a busy time and pretty much the schedule is starting to get set. Are you going to do this as AHR, or are you going to do it as off-site as a C4SB?
So we're going to leverage the thought right now that we're going to leverage the trade show floor, the convention floor, where we've got a 10 by 20 booth, and we're going to create a schedule of effectively small presentations or meet and greets for the different working group leaders. And so during the 2.5 or 3 days of the trade show part of the agenda, there will be a schedule of when the different working group leaders will be present to present and to, like I said, do a little bit of a meet and greet. That's what we're thinking right now. That's not set in stone yet, but that should be something that gets nailed down in the next couple of days, and then we can communicate it.
Okay.
And
Please
everybody,
help me out on that.
but by the way, able to attend you can register for AHR for free. You don't have to pay to be anything. So that's one of the reasons we're thinking about using the trade show space as the way to everybody can get a badge to be able to come in and participate in that.
Okay.
Great idea, but if we can get some kind of pre-spin on it so we can send people your way.
Absolutely.
Okay, no doubt we'll come back to that next week then. Good.
There'll be a whole new slide next week, Anto.
All right. Any other news or thoughts anybody want to bring up before we move on? Hearing nothing, let us move on then to composing digital twins. So over the course of this month, we started talking about master format because that's what we're talking about last month, and the thinking of is this what we're trying to compose? That was kind of where we started this discussion. And then we went to talk a little bit about the silo thing that we've been talking on and off about for the last 2-3 years. That's also another sort of a framing of how you compose stuff. We also spent some time talking about this, which is the capability table that came out of the Digital Twin Consortium, which does a great job in actually breaking down the sort of things that happen in a digital twin and thinking about them as specific capabilities, discrete capabilities. So this has been very useful. And we also, as Ken mentioned, talked a lot last week about single or multiple digital twins, which is very interesting. And this is the summary that automated buildings ended up with. We need to start composing, use case, and think plural. Again, all stuff Ken's been talking about. So I think we're making great progress. On our Wednesday planning call, we always have a planning call on Wednesdays. We talked a lot about all of this, and it sort of seemed that the sort of the composing element of this sort of theme of composing for digital twin wasn't as necessarily clear as we thought it would be by now. So we started talking about decomposing and composing, which is really sort of how we think we should be able to bring some clarity in terms of what we mean by decomposing and composing. So this is kind of the sort of the visual that we sort of came up with, which is kind of interesting. You take something that is monolithic, and in many cases, many of the systems that exist today that we all use are monolithic. So if you decompose them, then you can compose it into something else. But there's something interesting here in terms of the use of the jigsaw puzzle pieces as a sort of an analogy to explain this is not really the best analogy that we can use, because jigsaw puzzles generally have to be composed in exactly the same way as it was decomposed, right? That's the whole idea of a jigsaw puzzle. So it only makes up one thing, one picture, right? Which is not what we want. We want a lot of flexibility. So really what we're talking about is this. We're decomposing to think of Lego bricks. And once you do that, you have bricks that are each one is basically a capability that can then be composed in different ways depending on different needs, different types of buildings, different size of buildings, and all that kind of stuff. So this is probably a better way of thinking about it rather than the jigsaw puzzle. But in any event, all of this brings us back to capabilities, because each of these jigsaw pieces is Lego bricks is in effect the capability, right? Which brings us back to the capability table that we have talked about this month. So this is kind of the way of I kind of wanted to frame this discussion, and I'm going to hand it over to Doug Migliori, who's going to sort of dig in a little bit deeper in terms of some of the concepts here. Doug, over to you.
Thanks, Anto. I'm hoping my network connection is okay and you can hear me okay. Could you just back up 2 slides to the one where you had the Legos? I just wanted to make a note. One more. Okay. So this exercise of decompose to compose isn't intended to be what you have to do every time you want to build a digital twin. The decompose is really what the consortia needs to be focusing on, a decomposing monoliths into capabilities that are then granular enough that where they can be formed, those building blocks, those Lego bricks, so that I would almost suggest that what should be overlaid on that arrow is standardizing. So you're decomposing down monoliths down to capabilities that you can then standardize, at least on the front end API, so that they're all communicating in the same way with the common semantics. And then once you've done that, then it's always just about composing from those standard capabilities. But the decomposition needs to take place in order to really effectively create the standards that are going to allow you to do the composition on the right side. Thanks, Anto. If you want to then go a couple slides forward. So when I was involved in the Digital Twin Consortium and we were focusing on that capability periodic table, that was around the same time that Gartner started to really talk about composable businesses, composable commerce, a lot of things that were composing. And it was looking forward, thinking that where we've been before, and before is still almost current state in a lot of industries, but where the vendors are really the ones dictating through their packaged applications, predominantly monolithic applications, what the businesses, the end users are going to consume, what they're going to be able to use. And where we want to move to, the after, is where the technology providers are adapting to the specific requirements of the business or the use case, the building owner's requirements. And so that's really where we want to move from packaged applications to packaged business capabilities that can be provided by multiple vendors, but there's a structure to the API that's associated with each of those capabilities that allows them to be plugged in. If they're opted to be the vendor of choice, best of breed for a particular capability, but then if they stop performing as expected, they can be unplugged, and you can plug another vendor's capability in place of that without having to go through and doing a complete re-engineering of your platform. And next slide. So this is also tying in that the capabilities that we're really talking about should be considering an architecture that is event-driven for real-time intelligence. So them just adding that in there is something else to consider with how the APIs of each of these packaged business capabilities are designed, so that they can support the event-driven communication, both as inputs and outputs from each of those capabilities that are offered as services. Next slide. So here's an example of taking a single, what Gartner has coined as a packaged business capability, or PBC. Looks like some of my annotation it didn't get updated on here, but that's what a PBC is. This is Gartner's terminology for packaged business capability. And then the part that is the API, the diamond in the API, is really what you want to focus on standardizing. How a particular vendor, the inner workings of that capability that the vendor provides is all in the bigger hexagon. But the API part of it is what gets standardized. And so that's where those APIs, those diamonds, are really what needs to be tied both to a common syntax, but also common semantics, so that the inputs and outputs of each of those APIs can inherently interoperate, not integrate, but interoperate. And so that far right diagram is showing how you're starting to compose higher level services or systems from the granular capabilities. And you can extend that even further so that order management then can tie into something even bigger. So you start to build up a multi-tiered system of systems with this approach. Next slide. And so it looks like my updates didn't make it in here. So we're going right into an example, an exercise of the of CMMS, which I think there's a tendency to just refer to these as these products by their acronyms, and you could almost decompose just what those letters and those acronyms mean, and that's your starting point, because CMMS isn't just a one single capability, but that's kind of how it probably started out. Way back when the acronym stood for Computerized Maintenance Management System. The S in that is important because it's a system. GIS is a system. BAS also has an S in it. They're all systems. That's what they all have in common, but their core competencies, their core capabilities differ. But what's ending up happening is that because a PMMS provider wants to have a lock-in, they will take their core capabilities and extend those into other capabilities like you see here. Some of those capabilities may be best of breed. Others may be just add-ons that aren't necessarily best of breed. You, as the business owner or building owner, want to be able to select best of breed capabilities from multiple vendors and have them all interoperate. That is your ideal situation. So it's important to take the CMMS, the GIS, all of these other platforms that offer a collection of capabilities and break them down into their individual capabilities, and then start to use the consortia to model those capabilities and develop the standardization of those APIs. Next slide. This is we may not have another slide. Okay, we do have this one. So this is taking it one step further to where you're starting to look at individual capabilities across multiple platform systems or platforms, where you're seeing overlap. And because that's where we get challenged, because digital twin even had its initial core capabilities, but it's extending into other things like simulation. And so you don't need a digital twin product. You need a digital twin architecture that can then pull in capabilities that you may already have existing, but those additional capabilities from these other systems have to be exposed at the granular capability level as services that you can select from, and that they're modeled for interoperability. Right? Is this the last one? Let's see if there's one more. So here is this was included in a white paper that I was involved with the Digital Twin Consortium, where we were talking about the value of digital twins for airport operations. And we included this as a way to get an ROI back quickly based upon looking at what existing capabilities you have in your airport that may be supporting other systems, not a digital twin system, but more anything IT/OT related. You may have these existing capabilities. What are additional capabilities that you could put in that would allow you to leverage those existing ones and get to an ROI by providing value, greater value with just an incremental investment in a capability? So there's that type of exercise that you can go through all the way through these maturity level stack from just being descriptive all the way to autonomous capabilities. All right, I think that was it. That's quite a presentation for today. So opening it up for discussion.
So, Doug,
Yeah, open it up to the
are
group.
you suggesting that? Yeah, can everybody hear me? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So, Doug, I want to make sure I understand what the implication of your presentation here. Are you saying that in the case of the CMMS, as an example, with its 15 or so capabilities, that I should that vendors who that if you consider each of these a software module, okay, are you suggesting that vendors be able to break apart and sell separately a module or modules into an existing deployment of a competitor's solution, and that those modules, which would provide capabilities that that current vendor doesn't have, okay, and it would work with that vendor's product because of the nature of how we develop this interoperability functionality that we're all working to achieve. Is that my understanding? That's what you're trying to get to?
Yeah, and I'm not the one proposing this. I'm taking a lot of what I have seen done within the TM Forum, which is a global telecommunications consortia, where they have taken this approach. They have decomposed the capabilities for their OSS and BSS systems and have created a complete open digital architecture and APIs associated with all the business, the business and operational system capabilities. And so you as a vendor have to provide a capability as a service that's compliant with those APIs in order to be considered for work. And but it takes a consortia to have that much, a collective force to kind of move the vendors in that direction.
Yeah.
In that
Okay. Well,
model, there
I
really
agree. I just wanted to make sure I understood, because this is a radical departure from where we are today. Today, it's an all or nothing proposition. You buy your CMMS, that's what you get, and there's really very little you can do to enhance it other than to beat on the vendor and say, hey, I also need this. Would you please, develop it for me, and then hope that they do.
And and just back to the other
So
thing that
that's
you mentioned, Steve, was that you're exposing these capabilities, these individual capabilities, not to plug into some other vendor solution, because really all vendors at that point are on equal playing ground, and they're all just providing their service into a common infrastructure, which may be, a hyperscaler's infrastructure, but there's no plug into your competitor at that point.
Well, I mean, isn't the API effectively what that is?
Yeah, but you're plugging in to an infrastructure that is agnostic to any particular vendor's platform.
Yeah, I
Make
guess
sense?
I'm not not really, because I'm thinking, and as an example, when I first deployed my business, the inventory management software that we're using from a company in India, we purchased that product, and at the time we were using QuickBooks for our accounting package. And the two packages work just fine together because the inventory management has an API that QuickBooks can utilize. So they're doing different things, but they're interacting with a common data through the API.
Yeah, the difference, though, I think, is that any one of those vendors could be unplugged, and
Correct.
some other vendor could be plugged in. So even the ERP, or the financial management system, is kind of on the same level playing the integrate interoperating in the same way as everybody else so that nobody is controlling. Nobody is the controlling platform. The only one that's controlling the platform is really the end customer.
When I was looking at this list over the weekend, I was sort of looking at it, looking at these bullet points and sort of asking myself, which ones of these bullet points actually make this a CMMS? And some of them are. I mean, obviously things like preventative maintenance scheduling, that is exactly what a CMMS would do, right? But some of the other things like asset registry, okay, that is CMMS, but it also relates to other functionality that's outside of CMMS. And so there's things like reporting and KPIs and analytics. That's not a exclusively CMMS functionality.
Mhm. Agreed.
Go on.
Yeah, actually, what's interesting about this list is in the current, I mean, let's call it the legacy way of identifying CMS or IWMS, an owner would go out and request that they want to purchase a monolithic package like this, and they would have a feature list. They would have 3 or 4 vendors, and they would compare, oh, you have this piece, but you don't have this piece. Then they have to decide on one of them, and it might have 90% of what they need, but not 10%. But they can't extend it because they're stuck in the legacy systems. If you decompose it and you have, like Doug described, then you're not dependent on the vendor, you're dependent on accessing that information. The next level up is if you have those vendors that actually have APIs that you can at least get to their data so you can pull it out into another application and do the same thing. And the next level up is if the final diagram that you had, Doug, where the business is actually the owner of the data and they're hosting part of it, like let's say a space inventory, which we have some owners that are doing exactly that. Space inventory is outside specifically of any application. The other applications use that space inventory and the owner maintains that space inventory. So there's kind of a hybrid between all those, but the tendency is the monolithic way. And then there's also kind of another level where they say, well, everything's inside this monolithic application. We're going to dump it every once in a while out to a data lake and you can read that data there. And then that's kind of a not a truly interoperable system. It's more of a reading once a day or once a month or whatever, and then doing something else with it. So I think, and a mixture between all those, I think too is possible. And I think the decomposing and recomposing discussion is interesting because what we're going through right now with the C4SB project on PAE, which we're starting to publish more of what happened there, is we literally had to decompose everything out of the vendor systems to actually get to the data and then recompose it to create new dashboards on the fly based on the source data without being trapped in the vendor's dashboard. There's going to be some examples like that that are coming out from the PAE project.
Without being trapped in a specific dashboard, because you have it
That's right.
broken apart. You can assemble it in any way that's needed for whatever the building owner needs, right?
On the fly, yeah. And then you can do other things like then you get into digital twin territory where you want that dashboard piece of data to trigger a work order that is not dependent on what's
Right.
already built into the CMS that was baked in a year ago. It's basically on the fly. If you have access to the source data, then you can start connecting the wires like you had in the diagram onto earlier to trigger things that were not capable in the monolithic system that was baked in with the jigsaw puzzle pieces, but now you can get to the specific piece of data.
Because the monolithic system can really only do whatever the monolithic system can do. If it can't
That's
do
right.
something, then it can't do it. And you
That's
can't
right.
just plug something in to make it do that other thing. It's inherently sort of static in its set of functionality.
Yeah. Or you have to wait for that vendor to actually build that functionality, and it might take them a year to do it because their timeline is whatever. So it actually, by decomposing, it allows you to build much faster the functionality that you need right there on the spot, and even make it a disposable kind of an app that say, well, I need an app that looks at bullet number 1 and bullet number 3 and creates a new dashboard for that.
So I guess I'm
Open it up to
struggling
other.
with trying to convince myself that you need to really decompose everything as opposed to having a very rich API for the entire application. So for example, on this list here, the analytics, there are a variety of analytic tools out there. Microsoft Power BI is an example. This has a lot of familiarity with people with that, but that's just one of many analytic tools. And as long as I have a well-publicized API that gives me access to any and all data within that application, when I say application broadly, the CMMS in this case, okay, I should be able to choose the analytics tool of my preference based on what it's capable of doing. So the vendor may have some sort of an analytics package, but if I find it to be inadequate, I go out and pick a third-party product and I go to town because I have access to the data. So at what point do I really need to break everything down into individual components other than just to have a robust API?
With the flexibility to change any one of these bullets, any one of these functionalities.
But you can't change
inventory space
vendors,
parts, whatever.
but you can't change the vendor's functionality. All you can do is redo it in a separate piece of software.
Yeah.
So what
and
was done? What was done about 5 years ago, 5 to 10 years ago? Most of the large vendors tried to create their own platforms where it would be a walled garden, but they would have an app store where they would let different people, if you will, decompose the problem into different apps that they were planning on buying. 2 or 3 large vendors tried that, and nobody ever managed to get it to market. And one of the differences between that decomposition in the consumer space with the iPhone and the Apple Store and what we have is there's just not enough volume, right? So, if you look at different ways that you can decompose and who can take advantage of it, I think that the scale of our industry has to come into mind, and the economics of preparing an application have to come to mind. I'll leave it at that.
But isn't the issue here is that the combination, all of the different combinations, because there are so many different specific capabilities, that the combinations, the number of combinations, just so potentially vast that sort of becomes almost like the sort of the size of problem in the consumer space.
Well, and the number of consumers so small, right? I mean, we always have the opposite problem to the consumer space, which is that we have very few eyeballs looking at thousands of servers and sensors, whereas in the other case, we have thousands of eyeballs looking at a few servers, right? So I think that how the problem breaks down in other parts of IT is exactly the opposite of what we have.
Yeah,
I don't know
guess,
if
Jim, that's why I'm arguing for just a published API that is designed for as maximum flexibility as possible, because I think that would be a lot easier to achieve than trying to maybe go this
the thing is,
decomposition approach.
this isn't controversial. This is happening in the world of IT. So vendors are coming to market with solutions that are decomposed or decomposable. I mean, this is the trend of modern IT, not legacy IT, not our industry necessarily, but innovative companies are coming to market with components of a solution that can be composed. You can also use all of their components, all their Lego blocks, or you can just use part of them. Those are the vendors that are going to win in the future. That's what we're advocating for, and that's when Doug talks about a coalition or a consortium approach. We're going to be showing pathways for you as a innovative vendor or as a owner who would really like to have this flexibility, here's how you get it. Here's the path. It's not controversial. This is, it's been talked about for a decade or more in composable solutions in all different domains. To the issue that, Jim, when you always love the debate of what you described at a few different vendors. I worked for one of them, famously, big blue company, when they decided to try and do a super composition, not a decomposition. They tried to take their base product and supercompose other things to it, but they did not decompose their base applications. They did not make, yeah, they did. They did not make their components available to anybody else. You had to come join us. But that's just kind of. But your point is correct in that there have been people that have given this lip service in the past.
Right.
They've done it because why'd we do it? Because owners are asking for it. They're asking for exactly that flexibility. And you can't blame, some of those companies that tried to do it with that supercomposing method, because that's what they could do with the technology available at the time. And what's available now, and this is where it's exciting to be part of the Linux Foundation, is that there's all these new ways to be able to create from scratch, or when you go to modify your existing stack, you use these new approaches to be composable or decomposable. And so that's my 2 cents. And I'm in the car. Sorry.
No, I think it's fine. My only point is that we need to figure out how to build an ecosystem that can get to economies of scale, right? So, I mean, one of the reasons they supersized it is they had a business model where they were trying to own the platform, right? As Apple owns the iPhone platform, the App Store platform now. You're advocating an open system variant of that. But, the question is what do we need to get a four-set ecosystem to critical mass, to have people that can actually contribute and make profits from providing components, right? So how do you build the App Store effectively so that it's a win-win?
Anna, you have thoughts on this?
Yeah, hundreds, of course.
Figured.
Back to Rick's point about, some of those big companies trying to build the super system that did the whole thing. I think, Rick, if you actually look now, a lot of those guys are struggling with what they've done and where the value proposition is, right? They're still struggling with getting some real returns for the work that they've done there. If you kind of keep digging into those guys. So I do wonder about that. But again, I do like this slide, right, on how do you decompose a CMMS, because it's a good kind of abstract system. You can bring it down. My experience, of course, is the folks that build the big CMMS platforms. They kind of have gone down the same path as the big controls companies. Let's plow lots of features and functions into my product to do the differentiation. They all started out as work order management systems, right? And now they're in health and safety and risk and reporting and analytics and AI and machine learning. They're plowing all sorts of stuff into their platforms because they're trying to differentiate. And the challenge with the decompose is, well, that's nice, but you really only do these 6 things well, Mr. Company A. So I just like those ones, please, and not the rest, because I want to go integrate with other things from somebody else. Which then goes back to Jim's point. Well, who's the Apple in this world, right? Or who's the Google in this world that lets your average guy be able to put those Lego blocks together. I do like the Lego model, but it does simplify the problem, right? Everyone can pick up some Lego blocks and build something. Might not be pretty. Colors might be all over the place. Probably does the job. Will I be happy with it? Probably. Depending upon what my motivation is at the time. So we kind of, in my it's in my world, we're kind of stuck between all this, right? I would love for it all to be decomposed so that but me and what we do can make that happen, right? I can bring people, resources, technologies to compose together a whole bunch of different things and come up with something meaningful for us specifically. Can everyone do that? Not so sure.
But Anna, let me ask you a question because in your business, each time a new customer is brought to you or an existing customer wants to uh, expand their functionality, um, I would imagine that as you're looking at these different systems, one of your initial questions is, does the thing have an open API? How do I talk to it? Is that not the case?
Um, it is today, Steve, but I think someone posted a question and a point, and can't remember who it was. Maybe it was David. We are also starting to look at if it has first of all, it doesn't have an API. Now, open
Right.
or not, that's an area that machine learning and AI is really stepping into at the moment, right? In dealing with APIs, whether they're open, closed, proprietary, not proprietary. Machine tools, machine learning and AI is really starting to step into that space, right? Do I really, and you guys know me, right? Do I really need, if I'm doing that at that level, do I really need an ontology as well, right? Because I'm just going to hand it off to the next AI agent anyway. Do I need an ontology? So I think that space is changing, Steve. But yes, today it needs at least an API. That has to be a starting point. Whether it's open or not, I think it's becoming a bit debatable.
Yeah, I guess just going back to what Rick's doing with the
Right.
different working groups, I'm just suggesting that if there's not, I don't think there's a working group specifically geared around API definition and description and methodologies. It would be, to me, it just seems like a very practical step to take is to drive some consistency in how APIs are offered in our industry so that each get away from the one-off approach. So that once you've done the Linux Foundation version of an API, the whole universe knows what it is, what to expect.
I agree, but many of us have been on the path of Lonworks, BACnet, Modbus, MQTT.
That's a protocol. That's a protocol.
Fair
right?
enough.
Yeah. I'm trying to. I'm going the next level up. I'm talking about
Okay.
application to application, right?
This actually goes to the damn data we talked about before.
Yeah.
If you can get to the data through an API, you can use AI as well, like Anno said. But
Exactly.
just having an
Right.
API at least is a first starting point before we
Right.
have a perfect world where everything is decomposed, because that's not going to happen overnight. So the first
Well,
ask,
that's my argument. That's all I'm trying to say. Let's
yeah,
crawl, walk, run. Let's try.
Right.
We're at the crawl stage here. Let's get some agreement on what a good working API would be for everybody to use and adopt.
and it's actually a black and white kind of question, because if a vendor does not have an API and intentionally has it closed, it should be pointed out to
Yeah,
whoever's
forget it.
buying it to, hey, this is what you're buying. You're going to be stuck in this silo. Do you really want that? There's other
Right.
ways to ask for it, and then there's even more advanced ways when you completely decompose it eventually.
Right.
But there's a hybrid in between that if you wait for the perfect, it'll never happen. In other words, you can start with what you have right now, but you have to ask the right questions and buy the right thing.
Let me say that we, as the C4SB, we started with that idea of standardizing on APIs, or using, it's not exactly the terminology we use, but we're trying to bring models of standardized connection profiles. You might remember being a highlight, and that's one of the things we're still working. We're also working on this digital building profiles concept of being able to identify the different components that make up what would be a robust digital building, and the definitions of how the data from those different components can be available to other components. What we'll see with the PAE building will be the decomposing of a couple of multiple different systems. So there'll be examples of the decomposing of the applications from the data. So maybe the first step to just dramatically oversimplify is to say we're decomposing the business rules, the application, or the visualization from the data itself, making the data available in standard from all these different systems, making the data available in a standardized way. You don't need then an API to be able to access the data. You just need a new sort of application. But this is sort of composing 101. And what we're going to be trying to describe with PAE is exactly that simplifying of the problem here. And but again, great discussion. I think using CMMS as a proxy for decomposing.
I think.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that's. I think Doug said this arrow is really standardization. That's what you're basically just reiterating here. The purpose of doing this is so you can have things that are standardized so that you can use them in a standardized way.
Yeah, and one of the
just highlighting that, right?
Right, and one of the things that, again, in sort of the way software has always been built, and this is like software 101, is the data and the business rules were built together. They were hard coded together. The data was designed for the business rules, and the business rules were designed for the data. They were one and the same. Decomposing that to have the data be released from the business rules, from the application, if you will, is maybe the easiest thing to get your head around relative to then making the data available to other applications so that it can be composed into a new application. But that's one of the the dirty little secrets when we talk about walled gardens, is that the data was designed for the application. And so again, maybe that's a simpler way to think about decomposing, is like releasing the data from the walled garden as a first step, and standardizing the way that that's done. Standardizing it, absolutely.
So just to hit that again, this reporting and KPI and analytics in this CMMS was designed only to do reporting KPIs of stuff that's in this CMMS. And it is totally incapable of doing analytics on something else because it wasn't designed for that.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, because everything in a monolithic system is designed to work together very tightly.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think, Ken? Throw it back at you.
Wow, lots of pieces, lots of pieces. In decomposing, that's always when you take things apart. It's always the problem when we take a complex thing apart. Are we smart enough to put it back together again? I see the value in identifying the pieces and creating systems to do that. But you bring up some good issues there, is that these pieces may not be useful for for that.
Any other
Well,
thoughts?
the good news is that there are these approaches to being able to decompose, or to be able to think about how to modify the existing pieces. And we talked about this on Wednesday. It's like we all used to be really good at being able to take that transistor radio apart. And then some of you were actually good at putting the transistor radio back together. But could we use those parts from that transistor radio once it was broken apart? Could we modify the parts fairly easily to be able to build a toy or build something that powered something else? yes, you could. And that's where we are with modern technology, with modern software, with modern tools, is that you can use certain techniques to modify the components to make it Lego blocks rather than puzzle pieces.
One point I'd make relating to
Kimon?
that, Rick, is the PAE project's a good example because once it was decomposed, recomposing and creating a simple application with that data was within minutes in some cases, right? Because once you can get to that data, like you were saying, the KPIs and reporting onto an app could be built with that data pretty quickly. So it's actually pretty simple once it's decomposed and accessible and easy to understand. You don't have to understand the whole stack. You say, well, I want to create a new kind of report. Where's the data? Here's the PAE data of the energy in this. And we essentially created a new chart on the fly pretty much from that data once it was accessible. But until it is, then nothing else is possible unless you buy into that monolithic app. So that's the opportunity, I think, with what's already there. It actually simplifies.
I would imagine so, because we're reducing the complexity when we're just taking
Yeah.
a little bit of it.
You're breaking it down into smaller pieces. So it's a small Lego. You don't have to get the whole
Right.
toy box. You get that little 2 Lego pieces and you say, well, here's a new use case that I've created for whatever it might be, digital twin, dashboard, whatever it is. But if you can't get to the data, nothing's possible. Then it becomes very difficult. Then you have to buy the whole stack and understand it and get training on it.
I love the Lego example, and what always amazes us all, I think, is what people can actually build out of Lego. And I think what you just said there, Kimon, is amazing. Is what we need is some examples. Like to you, it was easy, but to us, we start to think about, yeah, there's going to be some problems with this. So I think if you can give us some successful examples, like you said, that in a few moments I can actually take this Lego pieces and basically create something new and better. So I think that's what we need is we need some examples that make it easy for as an old guy, I struggle to keep all this virtual stuff in my head. But when you actually put it all together, then I can actually see, that's pretty neat what they're doing. But I think we have to some examples I think are great, worth the effort.
Yeah, there will
That
be.
might lead to an interesting application, Ken. If you haven't seen it, there's an iPhone app out there called Brickit or something. If you've got a bucket full of Lego and you just lay it out on a white sheet of paper and take a photo, it'll tell you what you can build with it.
Yeah.
That's so that sounds like an interesting application for someone in our space to go like, okay, let's see what you've got and I'll show you what you can do with it.
It's like taking a picture of your fridge and saying, what can I cook
Yeah,
with this?
exactly. Yeah, same idea.
So I do wonder if next week we should decompose BAS.
Yeah, that would be good. Because yeah.
I don't know how big a
Yes.
list that would make. Okay, maybe we should do that for next week. Okay, Keith, you've been quiet. What do you think of all of this? The way I see it, you're so focused on very sort of the very thing that you're focused on that it's probably not possible to decompose you. You're speaking, but we can't hear you.
And Tom, sorry, was that directed at me?
No, I was asking Keith. Sorry.
Thank you. All right.
Can't hear Keith. Keith, it's a
Okay.
master composer, actually.
We're no good with lip reading. All right.
We
Still can't hear you, Keith.
Nope.
Oh,
Okay.
how about now?
Go ahead. Wrap it up.
Something.
Oh,
Yeah, wrap
yeah.
it up.
All right. Sorry, wrong microphone. No, I was just saying we need to just, walk before we run or even crawl or even roll at this point. I just think it's very comprehensive, but I mean, look at all the different systems. I think we just need to start with, and I think it would be good to just dive into the BAS. But I mean, you see before we move into all this complexity, like I think we just have to figure out how to just get the basic information out of stuff, you know?
Right.
But
Yeah,
isn't that
guess
the whole point that if you're
Going.
trying to get basic information out of a big monolithic system, that's really hard because there's a lot of data in there. But when you break it down to granular pieces, it becomes much easier.
And
So-
I also think that a lot of the decomposition on the CMMS, for example, is really their applications of what you can do once you get the data. I think like what's in the CMMS, the asset data.
right.
Yeah, the top
Like
one.
asset data that like let's get the asset data. And then you can do risk safety, compliance, reporting, KPI, simulation, and all that stuff. So I think it's a little bit, it's very comprehensive, but I think it's mixing in like we should figure out what job one is. Like what data are we after out of each system? So for CMMS, yeah, it would be asset data, nameplate data. And then you can layer on all these other capabilities on top of that.
Okay. All right, we're past the top of the hour. We need to bring this to a wrap. Thank you very much, everyone, for this great conversation. We'll get the video up and we'll meet you back next Monday. So with that, bye all.
Thank you.
Bye all.
Bye.
Bye.